Today is July 21st, 2024. We're at Malcom X Park, also known as Meridian Hill Park. And my name is Daniel Kerr. Could you tell me your name?
Sure. My name is Jonah Estess. I, with my fiance, live just right across the park and look out over the drum circle and hear it every Sunday. And it's sort of a part of our routine.
And how long have you been living adjacent to the park?
So I've lived here now since August of 2022, though my fiance has lived there since March of 2020, and we have no plans of going anywhere.
Yeah. That's terrific.
Yeah.
And what about this neighborhood, the park brought you? I mean, obviously the park must have been significant. But...
Oh, very much so. I moved here because I was living with roommates and my fiance owns his apartment, so it just made sense for us to move in there. But he described wanting to move to this area. He describes it as having seen the rooftop overlooking the park and overlooking Washington, D.C., and having already known a bit about this area's history and the central importance the park plays in this area and has for a long time, couldn't see himself living anywhere else in the district. I mean, I had lived other places, but really fell in love with this area. And actually on our first date, he spent what felt like a long time, and I loved it, but a long time talking about the history of this park and the history of the area. And because it was the pandemic, we were on a walking date. We were walking around the area and he was just pointing out all of these old embassies and current embassies and the history of all these places and how the park played a role in allowing this to become a center of political and cultural life for DC.
And now I'm really curious about that history, and I think it's safe to say that I know you are a historian, right? So
Yeah.
Obviously you are interested in
Yes.
this. But can you tell me a little bit about that history that was kind of intriguing?
Yeah, so I will just say up front, I'm terrible with names, so I will forget some people's names in this story, but there was so Meridian Hill Park, Malcom X Park, is referred to sometimes as Meridian Hill Park because we're sitting around the Meridian line demarcating Washington, D.C. from Maryland at one point. And I found some old layouts, I guess you would call them, of the neighborhood. And a lot of this was farmland. And in the late 19th century, after this was incorporated, I think it had been incorporated as part of the district or was about to, the wife of a senator from, I think, Michigan, Mary Foote Henderson is her name. I may get the state wrong, but Mary Foote Henderson wanted to increase her sort of social standing in DC. She was new to the city because her husband had just been elected, and but she also wanted to create a community for members of Congress, for diplomats, to work and socialize, and also just to sort of get away from the hustle and bustle of downtown DC. And she scoped out this area and decided the first thing she was going to do was to get this land set aside as a public park. And actually, right across the street, she and her husband built a castle of a mansion, some of the walls of which are still there. And then she commissioned different famous architects, some of whom had were well known for designing public parks, to design some of the embassies around the park. And the idea, with this sort of line of sort of rows of trees, was that much like in Old World Europe, or Old World European cities, the diplomats would be at work and then come out in the evening and go for a stroll down the tree line. And it was also a wonderful space, a wonderful area, because they could also look out over the district. They could sort of be present with the district while not being, at the State Department or at the White House, or sort of in the midst of all the hustle and bustle of downtown. And she succeeded in a lot of this. A lot of countries moved into some of the embassies she had constructed. Some embassies still remain. The Ecuadorian embassy is just up here on the northeast corner of the park. And then just a little further up 16th to my left, there's the Lithuanian embassy, the Cuban embassy, a couple others are still there. The old French embassy is just on the northwest corner of the park. But her full dream didn't really come to fruition when a lot of embassies realized they actually needed more space. And so they abandoned these embassies here or gave them to smaller countries with smaller presences and moved to what is now Embassy Row, Massachusetts. And so, I'm listening to Leon, my fiance, tell me all of this on our first date, and I'm thinking, how wonderful to not just learn all this, but to meet someone who appreciates this history as much as I would have had I known this before. And also, where was this history when I was learning about DC? When I was, Googling around and sort of trying to learn things or walking around, I realized how difficult it was for me to access any of this information. It took him a lot of digging, and it took me a lot of digging subsequently to learn a lot of this. And I'm really grateful that I did. And it gives me a whole new sense of appreciation for why Malcom X Meridian Hill Park remains the central social node in DC that it is today. Yeah.
And we started off by you talking about your appreciation for the drum circle.
Mm-hmm.
Can you tell us, do you understand is there a history to the drum circle that you've uncovered yet, or?
No, there isn't. I know very little about the drum circle, other than it's become a time for the both of us to sort of be silent and sort of meditate on a Sunday afternoon. I do know that it's been around for about a half century, and they haven't missed Sunday. I mean, it's even through the pandemic, through social strife, through all of what DC has experienced over the last half decade. It's been the one constant for the neighborhood and for the people who have participated in it. I also know, this isn't so much, I guess it's sort of history, sort of living history. They've always been the participants have always been an incredibly welcoming presence in the community. They're not just sort of people who found a space to hang out and drum. They have become a part of the lives of the people, and they've wanted to become a part of the lives of the people living in this area. And so they're always, we walk by, hey, come drum with us, or, and I've never done it because I'm just very, I get socially nervous a lot. But I've always felt like I've always wanted to hear them on a Sunday, and if I didn't hear them on a Sunday, something was really wrong. So again, not really part of the history, but sort of, everyone we've talked to has said they've always been that way. Always been that way. We walk by and people will be dancing, and little kids will get really into it. And I saw from some of the photos in the humanities truck that it's always been that way. But other than that, I don't know who started it. I don't know why really it was started. Maybe in conjunction with some of the protest movements or activist movements in the area. and I don't really know who participates in it today. I don't know if they live in the neighborhood. I don't know if they come from all over the DMV. I don't know if they have connections to any nonprofits or civil society organizations in the area. And I've always wanted to know the answers to these questions, but aside from asking a participant, not really knowing where to look.
Yeah. One thing I've heard, I haven't had anybody really tell me about this on camera, so certainly I understand. And it's usually they've heard of a person they know who has complained about the drumming. As a neighbor, do you ever hear those voices, or are the voices of, oh, they're so loud? Or...
When we do hear anything about them from neighbors, it's wow, they were so loud, but not in a negative way. Like, wow, they really got into it yesterday. Or my sense is that some of the newer, I mean, I'm not particularly, I'm a fairly recent neighbor, resident in the area, but that if people don't like it, they don't, at least around me and my fiance, they tend to not say anything. Because we're always, I mean, maybe it's because we're always talking about the park. We're always talking about how much we love living in the area, how much we don't want to move. And so maybe it's for that reason. Though I suspect that people who don't live in the immediate vicinity, who can't hear it, like people who might live on 14th Street or a little bit further past 16th Street to the west, if it's not so much a part of their daily or their weekly routine, they might not be against it, but they might not appreciate it for its significance, social significance, cultural, political.
Okay, and you talked a little bit about how you enjoy just kind of taking the time to kind of meditate and listen.
Yeah.
Could you tell us a little bit about that time?
Yeah. I mean, sometimes I'll just, if it's not too hot out, I'll open the window and just sort of sit there. We've got these two orange and yellow chairs we got from IKEA, and it's just sort of the perfect place to listen to them. But more often than not, we're doing something, right? One of us is doing the dishes, or up until recently, I would have been dissertating, and I had my desk set up right there at the window. There were plenty of times where on a Sunday I'd be working on some chapter, and normally during the week, if I'm writing, I'm listening to some sort of music that is monotonous, that helps to clear my mind of other thinking so that I can focus, so that the writing becomes sort of a practice in meditation, in the sense that I'm focused on one thing and not letting other things intrude. And more often than not on a Sunday, I would shut off the music, open the window, or crack it open depending on the weather, and listen to them, listen to the drum circle, because it served the same purpose. Often on Sundays, we find ourselves coming home from running errands around 3, 4, 5 o'clock, or we'd been out with friends and we just want to have the Sunday night off and relax and order in or make something at home, watch a movie. And not that we really plan this, but we end up sort of enjoying the drum circle separately. We're not having a conversation. We're not really interacting with each other. We're just sort of doing our own thing, taking in the drum circle, taking in the sunset that often corresponds with the drum circle. That's how I would describe the sort of meditative
Yes.
experience. Yeah.
Do you have any thoughts on how we might sustain the presence of the drum circle moving forward in time?
One would be to find out how its participants have managed to keep it going for so long and so consistently. And they've made it work for 50 years. I'd be fascinated to know how they kept that going for so long. I mean, it's longer than most people's careers. It's really remarkable. So finding out that way would be really interesting. I know it's really important for the longevity of I don't even know what to call it, a program, activity, an event, but to share this history further and wider so that young people realize that the mainstays of the drum circle may have also joined when they were young. That it is a resource, that it is an opportunity to meet new people, to have new experiences, to break out of your shell a little bit, something I struggle with all the time. So, getting young people, making them aware of it, getting them involved is a whole nother challenge. Getting 15-year-olds or 26-year-olds to do anything is really tough. But just making them aware of it, which is why I think it's so great the Humanities Truck has an exhibit about this right now. But also maybe working with the Butler Center organization across the street, or the National Park Service that manages the site, to sort of officially recognize the drum circle in some way. Not to memorialize it, because it's not gone, it's not going away, at least I hope it's not going away, but to almost like you give a theater to you name a theater after someone, or this is, on Sundays, this is their space. It's also your space, and you are welcome and encouraged to participate in this space, kind of thing. I think that would be really wonderful, because one thing I am afraid of is that if, for whatever reason, the drum circle were to be diminished or to cease, that much like a lot of the history of this park and this neighborhood, there's no lasting visible presence of that history. There are plenty of statues in the park that have been taken down for various reasons. Not that I agree or disagree with any of those reasons. There's plenty about this park that has changed, that it takes an expert archivist or researcher or person who is willing to set aside so much of their time to dig and ask questions and uncover that history, to resurrect the history so that they and whoever they happen to talk to about it knows about it. But if it's something that people see as they're walking by, it's a physical presence, I think that may be a really good, again, not that we want it to go away, the drum circle to go away, but it sort of formalize this space as the drum circle corner, or whatever it is, to do something like that. I think they deserve a lot more recognition than the sort of passive recognition people in the neighborhood, including myself, often give. It's like, oh, that sounds really wonderful, or yeah.
Thank you, Jonah. That
Yeah.
was very, very helpful. I appreciate it.
Yeah, happy to.